We got a really important piece of information by the Doctor in this chapter, and I think many might overlook it when you look at everything else that happened. The Doctor stated that he can recreate high-ends without All for One. However, it will be very hard, and he won't be able to mass-produce them like he could potentially if All for One was around. So, this is very big. That's a very big confirmation that the Doctor can create an army still. But on top of that, he is, as an individual, most likely someone that definitely always was someone that wanted to create beings like Nomu, or something that could, have multiple quirks. This is definitely confirmed in this chapter now, because with him stating that he could create them, that's very big news. So, I like that little detail that Horikoshi threw in there, and I am pretty excited to see just what really drove the Doctor to do the things he has done, his overall backstory. But okay, with that out of the way, let's talk about this city that currently has 90% of its population under the control of the Meta Liberation Army. 90% of that giant town we saw, that Shigaraki and the League of Villains were looking at, that's massive. That's massive. That's scary. That's a big city. Like, that's probably where a majority of the entire army is stationed. And if that truly is the case, then if this city gets leveled by, let's say, Gagan, then pretty much the Meta Liberation Army is, just gone. And so, it would be a big win if Shigaraki and his group could hold out until Gagan arrives and just the entire town gets obliterated. It would definitely be a major move. But before I get any further into that, though, 90%. Once again, a statistic. A number thrown in. And once again, I'm left wondering, is that factual or is it a bluff? Because we gotta look at the deets here. The dude that said that 90% of the population was under control, like a part of the Meta Liberation Army in this chapter, we didn't really get to see all 90% of the populace come out and start fighting. Because think about it like this. 90% is quite a bit. Even if there's a 10%, there is a chance that someone could see something, but 90% is very large. And for them to have that much control over the city, then most likely they know who is, like, let's say, someone that's not working with them, and who is working with them, with just how much power they have within this city. And so, if that really is the case, then it would be very easy to have the police force block off certain areas, which most likely is going on. For instance, you see how it's like a ghost town, no one is around, which most likely the police force is blocking off roads, making it to where the League of Villains won't be noticed, and the activities that the Meta Liberation Army is doing will not be noticed at all. Or at the very least, just make sure there's no footage from outsiders. And in this case, I am inclined to believe that there is definitely a large amount of people in this city that is working with the Meta Liberation Army. But once again, it's still not confirmed. We still haven't seen all of these over 100,000 individuals in one area, which I think would be almost impossible unless they're all marching as an army. But even then, with the amount of people that attacked Shigaraki's group, that's nowhere near over 100,000, or even 90% of the population. And so I feel like there's more to this game than meets the eye. Even if it's not a bluff, for there not to be that many people attacking them all at once, I feel like this might be more of a game to show that Shigaraki's group are in fact not for Stain's will. And let me explain. There is a brief panel, or actually a brief couple of panels, that demonstrates a camera watching very closely at what Shigaraki does to the civilians within this chapter. Like right before Shigaraki just completely destroys those civilians, you see this camera hone in and look that direction. And let's think about that. What would this necessarily mean? I mean, yes, Shigaraki, he's already a public known villain. The League of Villains are publicly known as villains. So it's not really going to hurt if more public footage is gained of them. Okay. But we got to look at the bigger picture here. Even though we, as the audience or the readers of this series, know that Shigaraki is no longer following the will of Stain, it doesn't mean that the public within the series knows. And once again, the media is incredibly powerful in this series. It's very relevant, very powerful, and it plays a major role into many things that happen throughout the series. And if the camera is Reid Ostrom's way of gaining footage on Shigaraki and then feeding it to the media, he can make a story to manipulate it like Shigaraki is no longer following the will of Stain. It would become public knowledge. And that's the important piece here. Even though Shigaraki's admitted to his team about that, it wouldn't necessarily be good if the world found out about that. And here's the reason. If the world found out that Shigaraki's group is no longer following the will of Stain, then Stain sympathizers, people that follow Stain's will no longer want to join the League of Villains. But also, it would mean certain individual civilians or heroes in society that believe in what Stain's cause was will no longer fall into what Shigaraki wants. They will completely view Shigaraki's group as an enemy, a vile entity that needs to be destroyed. So, Reid Ostrom in his own way, he's wanting to publicly destroy Shigaraki. Even if he can't kill the man, he made a backup plan to where if he can't get his hands on him and he escapes, he has footage to be able to ruin the man permanently. Because with what Shigaraki did, taking those two individuals out, they're very obviously civilians. And because of how much control he has over the city, he can paint the picture that these individuals, they were trying to defend themselves. Like, what can you do when they're backed into a wall, they're face to face with the League of Villains, a monster that can disintegrate you in one touch, what are you supposed to do? Sit there and let them attack you and you don't use your quirk? Well, he's like, this is the reason why civilians need to be able to use quirks. It can paint that picture. He can paint a political picture like, we need to have the rights to where civilians can use their quirk no matter what, for self-defense or anything. And that's the point here. Because it'll paint Shigaraki as a bad man and what his organization is, but also push the agenda of the Meta Liberation Army. And he would technically gain all of Stain's support, all, Stain followers' support. That's what he would do in that one swift moment. So, Reid Ostrom, an incredibly smart man. He has definitely multi-layered this. Because if you kill Shigaraki, fine. Shigaraki's out of the picture, you no longer need to worry about him. But at the end of the day, if you let Shigaraki live, and then he just straight up, ruins his image, then he doesn't necessarily need to kill him. He just needs to paint a picture, and then the regular heroes can handle it. It's over. Which, that's, I think, a better option for him if he really wants to defeat Shigaraki. Destroy him publicly, but also in the field as who is a better villain. So, let's get into the plan. What Shigaraki is trying to do. So, Shigaraki, he wants to bring Gagan into the town. Now, obviously, since this chapter, we now know that 90% is controlled by Reid Ostrom with the Meta Liberation Army. That means that majority of the populace that does die, they're not really going to necessarily be, quote-unquote, probably good people. Actually, you know what? I take that back. Some of them might be really good people. Because maybe the reason why we didn't see as many there in the fight is because even if they believe in the Meta Liberation cause, they don't want to die. They don't want to die because people do value their lives. And so, even if they will follow the will, they don't want to die for it. And so, I feel like, even if, Gagan comes in and decimates, there's going to be some innocents that are going to be lost. Which will paint the picture that, once again, Shigaraki, he's a villain, he's going to do stuff like this. But it'll also make us realize that he is crushing an enemy army, so you can't really blame him for some of the actions he causes. And I feel like before everything is said and done within this arc, the town is going to be gone. Like, it's, at the very least, majority of it is going to be completely destroyed. And I think it's going to be thanks to Shigaraki, obviously, but also Gagan just going in. Because, we saw the man destroy a mountain. If he's capable of that, just imagine what he's capable of in a city. Oh my god. Like, it would be terrifying. Because, obviously, with how strong he is, he would just wipe that city out like it's nothing. And it doesn't just stop there. We also do know that Shigaraki, he's not viewing Reid Ostrom and his army as bosses. He's not viewing them as, like, let's say, the end game. He's actually looking at all of them as mini-bosses, which I found very amusing in this chapter. I don't know how many of you guys noticed that, but when he was looking at the dude and he's like, oh, this is the mini-boss before the main boss, he was actually talking about the boss, which was Gagan. Gagan is the main boss, because he mentions HP at the beginning of the chapter, and, the mini-bosses are Reid Ostrom and his army, to set up to take down the major boss when he finally arrives within the city. So cool stuff, and I do appreciate all this little setup and dialogue from Shigaraki showing that he's becoming a better villain as time progresses. Now, let's talk about Twice. So Twice, it makes sense why Shigaraki did what he did. For instance, grabbing his mask, ripping it off, and having Twice just, like, break down. It's like, I feel like I'm splitting. The reason why he did that, even if it seems very cruel, the reason why is because, obviously, Twice, he was going off the deep end, like he was someone that was getting controlled by emotions, anger, and he wasn't thinking very clearly at all. So Shigaraki took matters into his own hands, calmed the man down, and would eventually give the mask back where he could be a little bit more calm and realize what they need to do. Because if the man's sitting there yelling and freaking out, Shigaraki wouldn't have been able to compose himself and talk to the doctor on what they need to do. They wouldn't have gotten anywhere. And they have very short amount of time. Their time is very valuable, so they need to be able to get the job done very quickly. So if they waste time trying to convince Twice what's going on or how the plan is, it's going to just waste time. So that's one of the big details there, is that Twice, he wasn't being attacked by his team. Shigaraki wasn't being malicious. He was just trying to calm him down. And I do appreciate the little detail to where Toga actually tries to, comfort him in that moment. Like, while he's down on the ground and freaking out, Toga's there, and it just shows that they're very close as individuals. And this goes back to what happened in the Overhaul arc. So, anything else left to talk about? I guess, talked about the city, Gagan, the cameras, to the civilians. I think I've pretty much covered everything that kind of needs to be covered. I mean, it's a pretty simple chapter, and I do appreciate that this is definitely a villain arc. Like, I thought that we were going to get maybe the heroes coming in and doing something, but the more and more I see this chapter, or these chapters, it doesn't seem like we're going to probably get a hero to really intervene. It's probably going to be a full-on villain versus villain fight, which is very different from everything before, this arc. And I like this. This is really nice. I hope Horikoshi does this more instead of just this one arc. I hope we have more content focusing on the villains and where their story is going. But that's about it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. With that, Chibi out.